Prep is obviously really important. A lot of your prep is going to be constructing your speech. So in terms of actually coming up with your speech, a lot of what you're going to do is what we just talked about. But for actual what you do in prep time, what you space your time out to do when you're actually in prep time, we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about how you prep your card, the process that you go through in prepping your speech, how to cut down your prep time so you prep faster, and finally what to do if you only have a few articles or don't really have any articles at all. So let's go ahead and start with prepping the card. I'm going to grab my example card here. I think I grabbed one. I did.
So Scott, if there's 3 questions,
yes.
You're saying you don't have enough articles, you're saying you don't have enough articles for all 3 questions?
It happens, especially if you break to finals.
Oh.
Some tournaments will give you really, really hard questions for finals. Like I think Point Loma, they spent, like Mrs. Nagatani told me they spent like 4 hours coming up with the finals extent questions.
Wow.
Because they just wanted to make them really hard, and they were intense. So sometimes you just will not have articles. The reason I did the one on Argentina was because that was the only question I had more than 2 articles on.
Wow.
So sometimes, especially if you start to break higher and higher, you will get questions where you just have no idea. A few years ago, I had 3 that I didn't know. It was actually the first tournament I broke. Semis, I had 3. I had nothing on any of them. Like I had 1 article. So I gave a speech about corruption in the Royal Bank of Scotland or something. I was like, I have no idea. Okay, anyway, but it will happen. So let's talk about prepping the card. Let's talk about what you're looking for when you prep your Extemp card. What you're looking for is a few things. First of all, regardless of what format you use, make sure it's very organized. Make sure that your Extemp card is organized in a way that you can actually use in a round, in a way that actually makes sense. You're going to only be glancing down on it for a split second or even maybe a second at most, which means you're going to have to make sure that stuff just jumps off your card at you. That stuff makes sense in a split second without having to sit there and be like, well, that's what that says. Okay, yeah, this is what I'm trying to do here. So make sure it's a really organized card. Also, look to make sure your points and evidence are easily distinguishable from each other. Make sure that your points, you can tell where your first point is, where your second point is, where your third point is. I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that in a second, but regardless of how you format your card, make sure you do so in a way where you can distinguish which points are where, and also distinguish your evidence. For evidence, I would just draw a solid line between 2 pieces of evidence so I could distinguish, look, this is one card, this is another card, this is one article, this is another article. So just make sure you have ways where you can easily distinguish so you can tell them apart. Make the card minimally invasive. The smaller you can make the card in your hand, the better it's going to be. For instance, I have my Extemp card in my hand right now. This would be the form of Extemp card that I would use in all of my speeches, and you can hardly see it. I had judges that said, wow, it's so awesome that you go off card and don't use a card in your Extemp speeches, and I'm like, I'm sorry. It's right here, guys, but make sure it's minimally invasive. You want the speech to be about you, not about your card, so you want people to be seeing you, listening to you, not looking at your card. I know some people who have their cards out like this. People can see your card, they can tell your card's there. I definitely recommend trying to make it as minimally invasive as possible. Yeah.
Can you tell me the type of pen that you like to use?
Yes, absolutely. It is the Uniball. The brand is Uniball. It is a Vision Elite, and it is the 0.5 millimeter.
Okay.
They're the black ones. The white ones are 0.8 millimeter, and they bleed everywhere.
Okay.
But the 0.5s do really
And
well.
can you get those at Walmart or Target, or do you have to buy them online?
I don't.
Office Max.
Go to. I know they have them at Staples.
Okay.
I know they have them at like any office supply store. They will have them.
All right.
Some Walmarts have them, some don't.
All right.
So try to go to Staples or something. But it's definitely worth it.
Why would you have a white pen?
No, not like the pen. The outside of the pen's white.
White ink to put on the
Okay, yeah.
white ink.
You're trying to catch the light, right? So it glances.
Invisible ink. Judge, my first point is. Oh shoot!
Somebody have a candle.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about setting up your card. The first thing you want to do, and this is my recommendation. This is the way I always talk to do it. You want to start with a 3x5 index card, obviously, and you want to fold this 3x5 index card in half to create 4 separate panels. If you'll notice, I have 1 panel, 2 panel, 3 panel, and on the back I have the 4th panel. So you're going to have 4 different places that you can put different things. This is going to be very organized. Also, folding it in half means it's less invasive in your hand. It doesn't take as much space, it's not as easily noticeable, which means people are going to be less influenced by the card. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about making it like as unnoticeable as possible. So if you have stuff that's on like the inside 2 folds of your card, how exactly do you do that without? How do you look at them without making it like, oh, I'm opening my card because I have to read my point?
You practice. I spent like hours one day just sitting with an index card, flipping it without looking at it.
Oh, okay, I see.
And so I can just do this all day, and it's a good time. So just do this. Make sure that you're used to handling your card.
You got
make
that
sure
on camera, right?
yeah, they did. Make sure you're used to fitting together how your card works. I think that's actually the 3rd point here, but yeah.
Thank you.
Basically, the way you format it when you have your card is you put your introduction on the first panel. So you put that first part of your speech on the first panel. I have mine on the first panel. I'll pass this card around when I'm done talking about it so you can kind of look at it. And then you put your 3 points in order on the next 3. So if you open it like a book, the next page is going to be this one. So my first point will be on this panel. My second point will be on the next panel if I flip it around. And then my third point will be on the back, kind of the other side of where the introduction was. This will give you the ability to go through your speech and just flip it and say, okay, I'm at my first point now, I'm at my second point now, I'm at my third point now, and I can go back if I have something noted that I need to talk about in my conclusion. Practice using your card, flipping between points, referencing evidence, etc. You have to practice to be able to make sure that you're not just sitting there reading your card. You need to make sure that you're used to reading evidence off of your card, you're used to your format, so you only have to look down to it for a split second. For instance, I had, according to the Associated Press on May 5th, good regulations. Popular e-cigarettes and cigar varieties are starting to be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. It would be better if you actually remembered what the evidence was talking about, because I prepped this 3 months ago. But basically, you want to get very good at just glancing down at your evidence, understanding what you're saying, easily seeing your source, not glaring or staring at your card. You want to make sure, again, that it's minimally invasive, that you're not referencing it too much. Yeah.
When you were talking about the 2 main sources that you really like, Stratford and the other one,
Yeah.
Obviously you have to have more than 2 sources. What other types of websites or article locations would you suggest getting articles from? So you have to have more than 2.
I'm going to talk about that in depth tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I'm talk about how to keep up with current events, where to cut articles, how to use them and stuff.
Perfect. All right.
But you can basically use any news source that you want to, because most of them are going to be credible enough. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow.
Okay, just a question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, though. Okay, so let's talk about what you want to organize stuff for in the introduction. The first thing you want to have is the statement of your question and answer. You want that at the top. You want that as the most important thing, so you do not forget to bring it up. That happens to me sometimes. I'll be going along, I'll be like, yada, 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 I'll look down at my introduction card and I'll be like, oh, the question's there, I haven't read it yet. The question is this. I was planning on reading it the whole time. Make sure that the first thing you have is the statement of your question and your answer. Then you want to write out your roadmap under that, and then the piece of evidence that you might use for the background information. For this card, just as context, when I pass this around, you'll notice I don't have a piece of evidence there. I already had a lot of understanding about it going into my speech. So kind of my background information was just me talking about things that were in my mind. So I didn't write down a specific piece of evidence on my introduction panel, but usually I would do something like that. Then finally at the bottom, make a note for your hook. What you're going to use is your introduction, and then maybe reference your conclusion as well if you want to go back to it at the end of the speech. Yeah.
You talked about writing down your question, your statement question. I've seen it done both ways. Some people write it on the card. Some people, like during the first start of the year, I wrapped, the slip of paper, I would wrap it around my card so I could see it.
Yeah.
And it looked like all one piece there. It's cohesive. Right. So, which way?
I write it down for a couple reasons. First of all, I'm the type of person that learns by writing stuff. So if I write down the question once, it's really easy for me to remember in the future. But the second thing is I like not having to deal with a second slip of paper. Because you could wrap it around, but then it might be difficult. I don't know how you did it, but it might be difficult to flip your pages well, to reference things well if something was blocking it. Or if you just try to get rid of that slip of paper with the questions, you might have to like put it in your pocket or something, and that's just a little bit distracting. Or you have to have it in your hand the whole time, and that's just annoying. So it only takes like 5 seconds to write down the question, so I definitely recommend writing it down so you can reference it well. It can also put it exactly in the place in your organization on that first panel where you're going to read it.
Do you hold the card in the right hand or the left hand?
The left hand. I gesture too much with this hand. So if I had it in my right hand, also it's harder to flip this way, but if I had it in my right hand, I'd be like up here, like doing this, and then I'd be like, oh. But this one generally stays. It's funny, I get comments on my ballots that I have Extemp hand, because when I don't have a card, I'll stand there like this with my left hand, and I'll just be like this the whole time, and people will be like, why is your hand cupped? And I'm like, oh. There you go.
Are you right-handed though?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so left hand still works.
Yeah, but it's easier to, because on this first page you have to flip it out this way. It's easier to do that with your left hand. If you do that with your right hand, you have to bend your thumb back and bend it like that. So it just makes a little more sense in the left.
I really did practice that.
Yeah.
Coaching lessons.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time doing this.
I'm an expert in the part folding of cards.
Yes, absolutely.
Card flipping 101.
Full coaching
Exactly.
session.
NIHD 26.
I mess with people, I made people really annoyed in prep sometimes because I just sit there in the corner, just flipping my card back and forth, and they'd be like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm sorry. Okay, now let's move on to information for the points. So this is going to be on each section that you have your point panels in essence. Try to fit about 3 pieces of evidence on each panel, 3 for each point. Shoot for that. You don't need to have 3. For instance, this speech only has 7 cards because it was prelims at night talk and I was lazy. But try to fit about 3 pieces of evidence on each. There should be space for you to fit about 3 pieces of evidence on each card, and you should be able to do so and fill all of the space on that side of the card. Again, really? So like here's the last page, you have the panel there. Basically the entire panel is filled with words. You want to utilize as much of the card as you can, because this is all you get to use when you stand up to speak. You want to be as prepared as you can. The best way to do that is by most efficiently using the space on your card. Write down the source, the date, and then the notes for what you're citing for. For instance, Business Insider, May 20th, what I had written down was e-cig rules destroy vaping market, drive many small businesses that produce them out of business. Job loss could be in thousands. That wasn't exactly what the article said, but that was my interpretation of what the article was communicating. Some of that was what the article said. So I have the source, I have the date, and then I have my notes on what that article said so I could communicate that effectively. Make use of every inch, don't waste real estate. I see people sometimes who have their cards like this, and they'll write across, and they'll waste like half of a line on multiple places on their index card. What that means is I actually did a comparison once of using this process as opposed to doing something like this and writing it out horizontally. You actually gain a whole extra panel's worth of space of writing it down if you condense your information down and make sure you're not wasting space. Wasting space is really bad because that means that you have less prepared information at your disposal. If you more effectively use the card, you're going to have more information to use.